When my boy told me I wasn't welcome at his place for Christmas, I just smiled, walked out to my car and made one phone call. By New Year's Day their mortgage payments had vanished. And that was only the beginning of my plan. First off, thank you for tuning in The Voice Inside. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to subscribe. And tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Today's special shout out goes to Linda Cooper from Texas. Thanks for being part of our little family. Now here's how it really happened. I was sitting back on Jake's brand new leather couch, getting comfortable, telling him, I'm making my special apple pie. You know, the one with cinnamon and nutmeg that his dad always loved. He used to say it was even better than his own mama's recipe. The smell of Emily's fancy lavender candles filled the room while I spoke. Jake shifted beside me, his wedding band catching the glow from their massive Christmas tree. Something in the way he sat told me bad news was coming. Mom, I'm sorry, but you can't come for Christmas this year. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I blinked, certain I misheard. What do you mean? Why not? He stared down at the glass coffee table I helped him buy last summer. After Emily complained the old one looked cheap. Emily's dad is coming and he'd rather you weren't here. My hands turned cold. He'd rather. It's just easier this way, Mom, Jake went on, his voice shrinking. You know how her dad is about certain things. He's got his own ideas about family dinners. I looked around the living room, at the silk curtains I paid for when Emily didn't like the neighbors looking in. At the hardwood floors from my second loan. At the expensive light fixtures that drained my savings. Every part of that house had my fingerprints on it. His own ideas, I repeated slowly. And what ideas are those, Jake? Mom, please don't make this harder. From the kitchen I spotted Emily's prized coffee machine. The $3,000 one she had to have for her morning routine, which lasted about 2 weeks. I doubted it had been used more than 3 times since November. And where exactly should I spend Christmas? I asked softer than I meant to. Jake's face looked pained. Maybe you could visit Aunt Susan. Or we could meet after, the weekend after. Like Christmas was just another appointment to be rescheduled for someone else's comfort. I stood, my back aching from 9 years of carrying this weight alone. I understand, I said, though I was already walking toward the door. Past the family photos where my face grew smaller in each frame, past the closet stuffed with Emily's endless coats. My hand gripped the cold doorknob. Son, I said without turning around, tell Emily's dad I said Merry Christmas. The icy December air bit my cheeks as I stepped outside. Behind me, Jake called my name once, then the door shut with a quiet finality. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the glowing Christmas lights in windows of homes where I'd never be welcome. My phone buzzed. Probably Jake, ready to toss out empty apologies, but I didn't check. I started the engine and pulled away, leaving behind the house I bought but would never belong in. The heater hummed as I drove through the streets of Brookfield, every corner holding memories of the woman I used to be. The one who believed family always came first, who would give her last penny to see her child happy. That woman was a fool. At the red light on Oak Street and Main Avenue, I watched a young mom load gifts into her car while her kids pressed their faces to the glass, thrilled for Christmas morning. Once that had been Jake and me, before Emily, before I became nothing more than a walking bank with inconvenient feelings. The number started spinning in my mind. $3,000 every month for 6 years. When I finally totaled it up last fall, the figure was $170,000. More than Michael and I had managed to save for retirement. Just gone. The light turned green. I pressed the gas harder than I should have, the car roaring like it shared my anger. Cedar Lane. That's where I took out my first loan. Our house, mine and Michael's, used as collateral so they could make their down payment. I remembered the bank teller's pitying eyes. Mrs. Collins, are you sure? You're risking a lot for someone else's house. Someone else's house. Not my son's future. Not my family's stability. Someone else's house. Then came Maple Avenue, and the credit union where I took the second loan after Jake lost his job 3 years ago. Just for now, Mom, he'd said. Emily stood behind him, an $800 purse on her arm, nodding solemnly while quietly counting the cost of my worry. Nothing. In the end, all my worry had been worth absolutely nothing to them. I pulled into my driveway, the one with cracks in the concrete I couldn't afford to fix because every extra dime went into their perfect suburban dream. The porch light flickered, another repair I'd been putting off. Inside, the house felt hollow without Michael's jokes, without the warmth of family dinners I knew would never happen again. My phone rang just as I was fumbling with my keys, the sharp sound bouncing off the quiet walls. Emily's name lit up the screen. Perfect. Probably calling to explain why I wasn't good enough for her father's polished, uptight standards. I'd been waiting 6 years for this conversation. I let it ring 4 times. Picked up on the 5th, just long enough to make her wonder if I'd answer at all. Linda. Emily's voice came sweet as fake sugar. It was the same tone she used when asking me to cover their electric bill or make a car payment. I heard about the little problem with Jake. Problem? I leaned on the kitchen counter, still wearing my coat. I don't think there's a problem, Emily. You've made yourself perfectly clear. Look, I know it seems harsh, she said, but you have to understand my dad's side. He's particular about people. They expect a certain kind of atmosphere during the holidays. A certain kind of atmosphere, I repeated slowly. And what exactly does that mean? I could hear shopping bags rustling in the background, probably more money spent that should have gone toward their mortgage. Money that, apparently, was my job to provide. Well, he's not used to your kind of food. All that heavy comfort food and loud talking. And honestly, Linda, he's an educated man. He likes discussions about books, politics, culture. The words stung worse than a slap. 9 years of swallowing insults for Jake's sake, of pretending not to notice the way she looked at me like I was the hired help. "My kind of food," I said evenly. "You mean the food you ate every Sunday for 4 years when money was tight? The casseroles you claimed reminded you of your grandmother? That was different. We were grateful then. But now with my dad. Now with your dad," I cut in. "You can't have the working-class woman embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table." The fake sweetness vanished. "Don't be dramatic, Linda. This isn't about class. It's about fitting in. My father went to Harvard. My mother has a master's degree. They vacation in Europe. What exactly would you even talk about at dinner? Stories about cleaning houses." I felt heat rise in my chest, but my voice stayed calm. "I built a business from nothing after your father-in-law died. I've had over 30 employees. I've paid more in taxes than your father earned in his best year. Money isn't everything," she shot back. "Breeding matters. Education matters. And honestly, Michael understood his place better than you understand yours." The air went dead still. She'd crossed a line I didn't even know existed until she trampled over it in her designer heels. "What did you just say about my husband?" "I'm just saying he knew when to stay quiet. He didn't make waves. He understood some places weren't meant for people like him." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Michael had more class in his little finger than your entire family will ever have." "Oh please. He was a janitor who got lucky. At least he had the sense to keep his mouth shut." "Emily," I said, my voice dropping to something I barely recognized, "listen very carefully. This conversation is over. We are done pretending to be family. You can't just—" "We're done," I repeated and hung up. I set the phone down gently on the counter. My hands were surprisingly steady. The kitchen felt smaller but somehow cleaner, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. I walked over to my desk in the corner and pulled out the thick folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank statements. Loan papers. 6 years of automatic withdrawals bleeding me dry while they lived like royalty. Time to stop the bleeding. I spread the papers across the table like evidence in a trial. 6 years of statements. Every month the same $3,000 gone from my account into theirs. A paper trail of my own stupidity. I started adding it up. First year, $36,000. Second year, another $36,000. By the third, I'd stopped buying myself new clothes. By the fourth, I was shopping at discount stores. This year, year 6, I'd been living on soup and sandwiches just to get by. $174,000. Not including the down payment. Not including the times I covered their utilities when Emily's shopping spun out of control. Not including the kitchen remodel, the landscaping, the furniture that was essential for their image. I leaned back, staring at the numbers until they blurred. Michael's life insurance. My retirement savings. The college fund we'd started for grandkids I'd probably never meet. All of it gone. Poured into a house where I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts and stopped at the number for my credit union. The automated voice gave me a choice. English or Spanish? How thoughtful. How kind for people like me. Customer service. This is David. How can I help you today? I need to stop an automatic payment, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Of course, ma'am. I'll need your account number and some verification details. I read the numbers off, listening to his quiet typing. Professional. Efficient. No judgment. No question about why a 64-year-old woman might be canceling a payment that was clearly going to her son's house. I see the payment you mean, Mrs. Collins. $3,000 monthly, to First National account ending in 9156. How long have you been making this payment? 6 years. The words tasted bitter. And you want to stop it right away? I looked around my kitchen, at the outdated appliances I couldn't afford to replace, the walls needing paint, the drafty windows I'd lived with because I'd poured my home improvement money into someone else's palace. Yes. Right away. It's been stopped. Anything else I can help you with today? No, the word felt better than I expected. No, that's everything. I hung up and sat in the sudden quiet of my little house. Outside, December darkness was settling over Brookfield. Christmas lights twinkled in windows where families gathered. No conditions, no judgment, no need to pretend to be someone else. For the first time in 6 years, next month's budget would actually work. For the first time since Michael died, I could fix the heater, buy good food, maybe even take a trip. I gathered the bank statements, the loan papers, every scrap of proof of my generosity. Then I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and watched 6 years of sacrifice burn to ash. The flames glowed against my face, warmer than I'd felt in years. My phone buzzed. Probably Jake wanting to apologize, or Emily, needing something important, like new holiday decorations. I didn't check. Instead, I opened the good wine, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. Tonight was special enough. I raised my glass to the empty room, to Michael's photo on the shelf, to the woman I used to be and the one I was becoming. Merry Christmas to me, I said, and I meant it. Morning came bright and clear. Sunlight streamed through my kitchen windows as I sipped my second cup of coffee. For once, I wasn't counting the days until more money disappeared from my account. The freedom tasted better than the expensive blend I'd finally let myself buy. At exactly 11:15, my phone rang. Emily's name flashed like a warning sign. Linda, she said, her voice already laced with that familiar annoyance. I need you to pick up my dad from the airport. His flight from Boston gets in at 3. I set my mug down, watching the steam rise. Emily, did you forget our conversation yesterday? Whatever that was about, we need to focus on real things now. My dad needs a ride, and you're the only one free during the day. The nerve was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't welcome at her Christmas table, she wanted me to be her personal chauffeur. And you're asking me because? Because that's what family does, Linda. They help each other. Her voice sharpened. Let's be honest. You're not exactly busy. You're too old to have real responsibilities. Just get in your car and go pick him up. There it was, the final insult wrapped in a demand. What airline? I asked, my voice quiet. American Flight 283. He'll be at baggage claim B. And Linda, he's expecting someone who can handle his luggage properly. Don't embarrass us. I could hear her nails tapping on what I imagined was her granite countertop. The one I'd paid for when she decided normal counters weren't good enough for her cooking videos. Of course, I said smoothly. I'll take care of everything. I'll even wear something nice. Maybe that blue dress I wore to Jake's graduation, he'll notice. The line went dead. No, thank you. I glanced at the clock, 11:58. Plenty of time. I poured another cup of coffee, added extra sugar, and opened yesterday's crossword puzzle. 12 across. Sweet revenge, 10 letters. I figured the answer would come to me. By 3:20, I was in my favorite chair with a fresh cup of tea and the Sunday paper. The crossword lay finished on the coffee table. Sweet revenge had been retribution. My phone buzzed. Emily again. I let it ring. The winter sun slanted across my living room, warming the space where I'd spent so many lonely evenings tallying the cost of my kindness. Today the silence felt different. Earned. Intentional. At 3:55, it buzzed again. This time I caught a glimpse of her text. Mom, where are you? My dad is. I flipped the phone face down and turned to the sports section. The Seahawks had won again. Some things do change. By 4:30 my phone had rung 8 times. I'd finished the newspaper, brewed a second pot of tea, and even started organizing that junk drawer in my kitchen table. Amazing what you can get done when you're not running yourself ragged for people who think you're their personal help. The ninth call came at 4:50. This time it wasn't Emily's name. It was an unknown number. Probably her father borrowing someone's phone from the airport. I let it ring too. Outside, my neighbor was stringing Christmas lights along his fence while his kids ran around the yard with that wild December energy only children have. Normal families. Doing normal things. Nobody stuck at an airport waiting for someone who was never going to show up. By 5:20 the calls turned relentless. Emily, then the unknown number, then Emily again. The buzzing became constant, like a furious bee trapped against glass. I walked into the kitchen, unplugged my landline from the wall, and then shut my cell phone completely off. Perfect, blessed quiet. I made myself a grilled ham and cheese sandwich and heated up a can of chicken soup. Comfort food I hadn't allowed myself in months because every grocery dollar had been stretched to cover their lifestyle. The cheese bubbled to a golden brown, the soup sent up steam from my favorite bowl. Outside, the winter sun had already begun to sink, throwing long shadows across the backyard. Somewhere across Brookfield, I imagined two people standing in an airport parking lot, bickering about taxi prices, wondering how their personal driver had dared to leave them stranded. The thought made my soup taste even better. By 6, dinner was done, the dishwasher loaded, and I was thinking about what movie to watch. It had been years since I'd had a whole evening to myself. No emergency calls for money, no last-minute errands. I was just reaching for the remote when the pounding started. Not knocking. Not ringing. Pounding. Hard enough to shake the frame, the kind of sound made by someone who wants you to know they're furious. I set down my tea and walked toward the door, slow and steady, already knowing exactly who I'd see. The pounding grew louder with each step. Through the peephole, 3 figures crowded my porch like wolves around prey. I opened the door to find Richard Harris, his face an alarming shade of red, just inches from mine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked, shoving his way into my living room without so much as an invitation. We waited at that airport for over 4 hours. Margaret Harris swept in next, her usually perfect hair in disarray, her lips drawn tight with contempt. "This is completely unacceptable behavior from someone your age, Linda. Absolutely shameful." Emily came last, her designer coat wrinkled, makeup smudged. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done? My dad had to take a $60 taxi because you decided to throw a tantrum. Get out of my house." My voice sliced through their noise like a blade through cloth. They froze mid-rant, startled by the steel in my tone. "Excuse me." Richard's face deepened from red to purple. "You don't get to make demands here, lady, not after what you pulled today." "This is my house," I said evenly, not budging from my spot by the door. "And I want you out. Now." Margaret stepped forward, her voice oozing with the same condescension she'd probably practiced her whole life. "Linda, you clearly don't grasp how serious your mistake is. My husband has connections all over this city. Business, social, connections that matter. You can't treat people like us this way and expect." "This was a lesson," I cut in, locking eyes with her. "A lesson about your arrogance and the way you treat people you think are beneath you." Emily's mouth fell open. "A lesson? Who do you think you are, teaching anyone anything? You're nobody. I'm someone who finally stopped being your personal bank and your taxi service." I stepped aside, holding the door open wide. "Lesson's over. Leave." Richard jabbed a finger toward me but didn't quite dare touch. "You have no idea who you're messing with, old woman. I've been in this city longer than you've been breathing its air. I know people, important people, who can make your life very, very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mr. Harris?" His voice dropped low. "You think abandoning elderly people at an airport is something you can just do without consequences? You're about to learn how wrong you are." Margaret's smile was sharp as glass. "Indeed. Actions have consequences, Linda. Yours will be public." Emily tugged his arm. "Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old woman isn't worth it." They shuffled out like a retreating army, but Richard turned back at the door. "You'll regret this," he said. "Guaranteed." I closed the door, locked it with a satisfying click, and watched through the window as they climbed into their rental car, still arguing as they disappeared into the December night. The air in the house felt lighter without them, as if their very presence had been a stain I'd finally scrubbed clean. But their parting words lingered in the quiet. Public consequences, important people, connections. I went back to the living room, lifted my tea still warm in the cup. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt something that might have been worry, but it was drowned out by something far stronger. Excitement. 4 days later, I was sipping my morning coffee, reading the local paper, when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 2. The headline read, "Local woman abandons elderly man at airport during holiday blizzard." My hands stilled around the mug. There I was, black and white. A photo pulled from my old cleaning company's website, probably 7 years out of date. Beneath it, a story that made my blood run cold and my temper burn hotter with every sentence. According to the article, Richard and Margaret Harris, visiting their daughter for Christmas, had been stranded at the airport for over 5 hours on Sunday after a family member, me, failed to appear for a scheduled pickup. They'd waited in freezing temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the area. Winter storm warning? It had been 55 degrees and sunny. "We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that," Richard was quoted as saying. "We called repeatedly, but Mrs. Collins never answered. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just rude, it's dangerous." The rest was a mix of carefully planted insinuations, pattern of strange behavior, concerns about her mental state, painting me as some unstable old woman who had suddenly snapped. No mention of being told I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner. No mention of Emily's demands, or the years of financial drain. Just me, the villain in their story. I read the article twice more. Fully. Let every word settle. The byline read, "Susan Rodriguez, community editor." I didn't know her personally, but I knew the move. Richard had pulled in favors. Used his old banking contacts. Got the story planted right where it would do the most damage. Smart. Very smart. For the first time since this started, I felt a flicker of respect. They weren't just spoiled rich people throwing tantrums. They were strategic. Calculated. And in a small city like Brookfield, reputation was currency. One well-placed newspaper article could undo decades of work. They'd declared war. I folded the paper carefully, set it aside, and felt my mind shift into the same gear that had built my business from nothing. This wasn't about airport pickups anymore. It wasn't about Christmas dinners or mortgage payments. This was about winning. I opened my laptop and started typing their names into search bars. Richard Harris, Margaret Harris, Emily Collins, pulling up social media accounts, connections, habits, weaknesses. Everything they'd foolishly shared with the world. If they wanted to play chess, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. I glanced at the calendar. December 20th. 5 days until Christmas. 5 days to plan something they'd never forget. For the next 4 days I lived in a different world. Not the one where I was Linda Collins, the worn-down woman who let her family walk all over her. This was the world where I was Linda Collins, businesswoman, strategist, someone who'd built from nothing and wasn't about to let a handful of entitled parasites tear it down. My laptop became my command center. Richard Harris, retired First Community Bank president. Member of the Brookfield Country Club. Board member for the Downtown Business Association. A man who'd spent his career in trust and influence. A man with a lot to lose. Margaret's Facebook painted a perfect life. Charity luncheons, book clubs, vacations to Martha's Vineyard. Every post polished to project elegance and status. Every one of them paid for, at least in part, with money that wasn't hers. Emily's Instagram told a less careful story. Photos of our home, the kitchen I'd paid for, check-ins at high-end restaurants during months when I'd been covering their car payments. Her post from last week. So excited for Christmas dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills. Our home. Our success. Jake's Facebook handed me the final piece I needed. His new friend, Susan Rodriguez, community editor at the Herald Tribune. The same Susan who'd written the little hit piece about me. I leaned back in my chair, scanning the evidence spread across my screen. They'd made 4 critical mistakes. First, they had completely underestimated me. Second, they'd gone public, which meant I could go public too. Third, they'd documented their entire privileged lives online. A perfect catalog of hypocrisy. Fourth, they'd left a digital trail linking themselves straight to the newspaper story. I clicked on Susan Rodriguez's profile. 38 years old. Journalism degree from state. 12 years in local papers. No ties to banking or finance. Which meant Richard hadn't called an old buddy. He'd gone through someone in his business network to reach her editor. A quick check through local business directories confirmed it. Mutual contacts between Richard Harris and Susan's boss. The story hadn't just appeared, it had been planted. Carefully. Deliberately. I opened a new document. Not to write a rebuttal. Something much better. Timeline. 6 years of financial support. Bank statements, receipts, canceled checks. The $52,000 down payment from my home equity loan. The $23,000 kitchen renovation when Emily decided marble countertops were essential. 72 monthly mortgage payments of $3,000 each. $174,000. And that's not even counting the utilities, the landscaping, the furniture, the extras. Over $300,000 in total. More than I'd spent on myself in 15 years. My phone buzzed, unknown number. Probably Emily trying a new angle. I ignored it. Kept working. By evening, every piece of evidence was printed, highlighted, and stacked in a file thick enough to stop a truck. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots from their social media flaunting things I'd paid for, and a copy of the newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins. Lie next to Richard's dangerous weather claim, false next to the suggestion of my strange behavior. Missing context where 6 years of financial support was conveniently omitted. I glanced at the calendar. December 24th was circled in red, not because it was Christmas, but because it was the perfect day for justice. Emily's Facebook had the rest of the plan. Christmas dinner for 15. Family, friends, neighbors, people in their social circle. The same crowd that read the Herald Tribune and believed every word. They deserved the truth. I went to the kitchen and pulled out my good camera. The one I'd bought years ago for job site photos. This time it was for something much more satisfying. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Tomorrow Richard Harris and his family would find out what happens when you declare war on someone who actually knows how to fight. Christmas Eve morning broke gray and cold. The kind of winter day that made you grateful for warmth and company. Too bad I wasn't welcome at either. But I had other plans. I laid out my evidence like a lawyer prepping for trial. Statements in chronological order, each mortgage payment highlighted in yellow. Receipts lined up by date showing the constant flow of my money into their lifestyle. Photos printed from social media. Emily's new jewelry, their vacation shots, the glittering Christmas decorations currently hanging in the house I'd helped them keep. 15 identical packets. One for each dinner guest. The newspaper article sat on top of every stack, my red pen comments plain to see. I dressed carefully, my best black suit, the one I'd worn to Michael's funeral. Pressed, polished. Today I was saying goodbye to the woman who'd been her family's doormat. Tonight I'd be the woman who demanded respect. At 7:15 I loaded the briefcase with the evidence packets and drove to Willowbrook. Their house glowed with warm light, cars spilling out of the driveway and along the curb. Through the front windows I saw movement, Emily bustling between guests, smiling like she owned the place. I parked across the street. Checked my watch. 7:30. Perfect. Late enough for everyone to be seated, early enough to trap them at the table. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Emily loved to brag about how safe her neighborhood was, how they didn't need security, like people in rougher areas. I stepped inside, warm air rushing over me along with laughter and clinking glasses from the dining room. "That's not how we do things in our family," someone was saying, followed by polite chuckles. Family. After everything they'd done to push me out, I walked straight into the dining room with my briefcase in hand. 15 heads turned, faces shifting from surprise to discomfort. Emily froze with her wine glass halfway up. Jake went pale. Richard and Margaret looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice calm and even, setting my briefcase on their marble side table. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Emily found her voice first. "Linda, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately." Actually, I unlatched the briefcase, pulling out the first stack of papers. "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and the lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize set down her fork. Probably one of Margaret's charity friends leaned forward, curiosity in her eyes. "What is she talking about, Emily?" She's having some kind of breakdown, Emily said quickly. Jake, call someone. But I was already moving around the table, slipping a packet in front of each guest. Here are the bank records, I said lightly as if we were chatting over coffee. 6 years of financial support, $174,000 in mortgage payments alone. Plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The only sound was the rustle of papers as 15 people began flipping through the evidence. I watched their faces change as the dates, amounts, and sheer scale of it all sank in. This is, a man began then stopped, staring at the numbers. Outrageous, finished the woman across from him. She looked straight at Emily. Why didn't you tell us any of this? Emily's polished composure was cracking. It's more complicated than it looks. Linda volunteered to help us. We never asked. Actually, I cut in, pulling the newspaper article from my briefcase. Let's talk about what you did ask for, and what you told the media about me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I slid copies of the Herald Tribune story across the table, watching as people recognized my photo from the unflattering article that had run 5 days ago. Now, I said, letting my voice carry, let's discuss the real manipulators in this family. Richard's face had gone from red to gray. Margaret sat frozen, her wine glass hovering in midair. Mr. Harris here used his banking connections to plant this story, I continued, tapping the article. Notice how I'm painted as unstable, dangerous. Abandoning poor elderly people in freezing weather. A silver-haired man looked up from the page. Richard, what is this about? It was 55 degrees and sunny, I answered before Richard could speak. And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Emily's parents, coming to the Christmas dinner I'd been banned from because I wasn't good enough for their company. Margaret's voice broke in. That's not, we never said. Never said what, Margaret? I pulled out my phone, showing screenshots from Emily's social media. That I was too working class for your father? That my home cooking and blue-collar conversation would embarrass you in front of your educated friends? The charity friend shifted uncomfortably. Margaret, surely you didn't. She's twisting everything, Richard blustered. This woman has serious mental health issues. The stress of aging, financial problems. Financial problems? I almost laughed. Mr. Harris, I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $4,000 a month for 6 years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have. I turned to the table at large. These people have taken over $300,000 from me while mocking me behind my back. They've turned my own son against me, shut me out of family gatherings. And when I finally stopped playing bank and chauffeur, they tried to destroy my reputation in print. Jake spoke for the first time, barely above a whisper. Mom, I didn't know about the newspaper. Your wife knew, I said evenly. And her parents orchestrated it. They turned me into a villain because I refused to fund their lives. I could see the shift happening around the table, the slow, unmistakable tilt of public opinion. This is unconscionable, said an elderly woman in pearls, staring at the statements. She turned on Richard. How could you let your daughter take advantage of this woman's generosity, then attack her when she stopped enabling you? Richard's voice faltered. You don't understand the full situation. I understand perfectly, the woman shot back. She's been keeping your family afloat financially while you've treated her like hired help. And when she finally said no, you tried to ruin her name. Margaret's voice was thin and sharp. She abandoned us at the airport. After you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because my presence would be inappropriate for your father, I said calmly. After 6 years of paying your bills while you sneered at my background and education. The silence was absolute. 15 people staring at Richard and Margaret with everything from disgust to embarrassment. Emily made one last try. Everyone, please. This is a family matter that's gotten out of hand. No, I said firmly. This stopped being a family matter when you made it public. When you weaponized the newspaper. When you decided my reputation was acceptable collateral damage for your pride. I looked around at faces I didn't know but who now knew me and the truth. I wanted you all to hear this before you read about Linda Collins in the paper again. Because you will read about me again. But next time, it'll be the real story. I closed my briefcase. Straightened my jacket. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It was the last dinner I'd ever be paying for. As I walked to the door, I could hear the eruption starting behind me. Voices raised, accusations flying, questions snapping through the air. The sound of a carefully built social facade collapsing. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. The letter came on a Thursday morning in April, delivered by certified mail. I signed for it at my front door, the spring air smelling of new growth and possibility instead of the winter desperation that had marked those dark December days. Notice of default. Final demand for payment. 4 months of missed mortgage payments had caught up to Jake and Emily like a tidal wave. $12,000 in arrears. 14 days to pay or face foreclosure on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside and went back to my coffee, reading it the way you might read about a distant storm. Interesting, but no longer my problem. The calls had been coming for weeks. Emily's number blocked after the first hysterical voicemail. Richard and Margaret Harris, their social standing in Brookfield reduced to ash after their Christmas dinner humiliation. Even Jake had been calling. I'd been ignoring those, partly from anger, partly to see how long it would take him to swallow his pride. Apparently the answer was 112 days. He knocked on my door that Saturday evening. Not the confident man who'd once told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas, but a shell, dark circles under his eyes, expensive suit rumpled, the scent of desperation clinging like cheap cologne. "Mom," he said when I opened the door. "We need to talk." I stepped aside, watching him take in my living room as if he'd never seen it before. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck. The fresh paint on walls that hadn't been updated in a decade because every spare dollar used to go toward his life. The repairs I'd finally been able to make, now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's dream. "Nice place," he said quietly. "That's what happens when you spend your money on yourself instead of on people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee." He shook his head, sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch. "Mom, I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything. Christmas dinner, the newspaper article. The way we treated you." "Go on." "I didn't know about Richard planting that story. I swear I didn't. When I found out," he raked a hand through his hair. "God, Mom, the things they said about you behind your back. The way they talked about our family, about Dad's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Michael, but I kept my voice even. "And what exactly did they say about your father? That he knew his place better than I know mine? That he understood boundaries?" Jake couldn't meet my eyes. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence, 6 years of mistakes pressing between us. Outside, my neighbor worked in his garden. The easy sounds of a normal Saturday evening in a normal neighborhood, where sons didn't shut their mothers out of Christmas dinner. "The house is in foreclosure," Jake said finally. "We can't make the payments without." He stopped, realizing exactly how that sounded. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage." "I know how it looks," he said miserably. I leaned forward until he had no choice but to meet my eyes. "Do you know exactly how much I sent you over 6 years?" He nodded faintly. "Emily worked it out after Christmas. The house payments, the down payment, everything. Over 300,000. 326,412, I corrected. "I know the exact number because I finally did something I should have done years ago. Added it up." His face crumpled. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, Jake. That money's gone. More importantly, those years are gone. Years I could have spent building a real relationship with you instead of funding your wife's fantasy life. I know that now." He looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. "But maybe we could start over. Maybe there's a way." "Are you asking me to resume the house payments?" The hope went out like a light. "We're going to lose everything, Mom. The house. Emily's respect. Her dad's approval. I don't know what I'll do." "You'll figure it out," I said, not unkindly. "The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them." He started to cry then, quietly, like a man with no other moves left. "I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you. And now I've lost you forever." I watched him for a long moment. This man I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. the one who had let his wife's family convince him that his mother wasn't worth their table. If you enjoyed my story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far it's traveled.